This video is brought to you by Squarespace. When you first start out with 3D printing, you're likely to print almost exclusively PLA, and for good reason. PLA is easy to use, affordable, and great for maybe 80% of the things that you'd want to print as a beginner. However, as you get more skilled both in 3D printing and in understanding what types of things you actually can print, you'll inevitably want to try more versatile, tough, or durable materials. Well, stick around because in this video, I'm going to give you a quick guide as to which filaments are best for what types of projects and how to choose which one to use for your next project. Let's dive in. First, let's start out with PLA, or polylactic acid. And if you feel like you're already a PLA pro, you can feel free to use the chapters below to skip around. Polylactic acid has become an incredibly popular polymer, not just in 3D printing, but in many other uses, because it's easy to produce from renewable resources at scale. In fact, in 2021, PLA actually had the highest consumption of any bioplastic in the world, though come to think of it, I can't actually name a single other bioplastic. PLA is probably best known for two things: its low melting point and its high rigidity. In fact, while many people erroneously believe that materials like ASA, PETG, or ABS, which we'll get into a minute, are stronger than PLA, the fact of the matter is, as shown from Stefan from CNC Kitchen's rigorous testing, basic PLA is by far the strongest material in a hook test, as well as in a 3-point bending test. And you should definitely check out Stefan's video if you want to see the scientific data. But all this basically means that PLA is also the most rigid material. With that said, PLA's extreme rigidity also comes with a trade-off, and we can see from Stefan's testing that the impact strength of PLA is much less than the other materials we're going to talk about. Of course, there are materials out there like this so-called PLA Plus or tough PLAs, which add impact resistance or a bit of flexibility depending on which brand you go with. I generally go by the motto that a tiger doesn't change its stripes, and if you can print another material that is more suited to your project, like the ones we're about to talk about, well, then you probably should. Finally, let's address that other well-known criteria of PLA and the one that makes it so popular for 3D printing: its low melting point. PLA doesn't like heat, and while you might think to yourself that its melting point is high enough, somewhere around 190 degrees for printing it, the fact is that it will begin to deform at a much lower temperature. I've actually had PLA parts deform in a printer cabinet that never exceeded 45 degrees Celsius because they were under stress. What's more, while PLA is surprisingly chemical resistant, it is known to not respond well to UV or direct sunlight. Finally, it is also known to deform over time if exposed to constant strain. So what's the verdict? What should we actually use PLA for? Well, first of all, because of the wide availability of different colors and styles ranging from your standard PLAs to matte ones like this one from Bamboo Lab, or silk ones, or rainbow silk ones, or co-extrusions, and much, much more, PLA really is the reigning champion for anything decorative, such as statues, toys, and so on. But don't stop there. It's really not just limited to that. You should also consider PLA for any types of indoor functional parts which will not be exposed to temperatures above ambient or excessive and prolonged force. That means that while PLA is probably not a good candidate for your PC fan ducting, it's great for things like your honeycomb wall, your Gridfinity, your shelf brackets, or I've even used PLA for my trash bins at home, and it works great. Inevitably, in your 3D printing journey, you're going to decide that you want to print something flexible. And when you do, TPU is most likely where you're going to end up. Though there are many flexible plastics out there in the world, for a number of reasons way above my pay grade, TPU is generally the only plastic that you find commonly used in 3D printing. Now, TPU does come in a number of different hardness ratings, and generally speaking, the higher the number, the easier it will be to print in the case of the A ratings. For example, a 98A TPU is going to be harder than a 95 TPU. And the easier it will be to print, the higher that number is. This is because softer materials can be extremely tricky to extrude, especially if you are not using a direct drive extruder. I mean, just imagine pushing a wet noodle through a very, very long drinking straw. Not fun, right? In any case, there isn't too much to say here about TPU. I mean, if you need a flexible print, like a seal on a box or something that's going to absorb impact, like a door stopper or a table corner, then TPU is just gonna be your filament of choice under most circumstances. Enough said. Up next, let's talk about PETG, or polyethylene terephthalate glycol. This is often seen as the natural next step material to PLA and offered by many different filament manufacturers as a tougher alternative to their PLA, with similar printability. But I'm just going to go ahead and say something controversial here. I don't believe that PETG actually deserves the popularity it enjoys. First of all, if we once again reference Stefan's fantastic test data, thank you, Stefan, we see that PETG doesn't actually excel at anything in particular when compared to other materials, at least not in terms of strength. What's more, while PETG does have a higher heat resistance and significantly better UV resistance, it does pale in comparison to that of ASA. More on that in a second. What's more, PETG suffers from a number of quality life and inconvenience issues, including the fact that it sticks too well to most beds and can actually damage your print surface, the fact that it sticks to nozzles and boogers up, and the fact that it's extremely hygroscopic and must be dried thoroughly before printing. Oh, and on top of all of that, it's also very slow to melt, meaning that you cannot use PETG for any of the high-speed printing that is becoming so much more commonplace. All in all, I'm just gonna say it. PETG is a pain in the butt, at least for me. So why then is PETG so popular? Well, it's actually quite simple. It's historically been easier to print than ABS or ASA. You see, while PETG has all of these things counting against it, it has one major thing going for it. It can be printed on an open printer without needing to worry about things like warping and at lower temperatures. And with the previous generation of open, slow bedslinger designs who can't reach 300 degrees Celsius, many of the downsides, like being too sticky or not flowing as fast as, say, ABS, were really non-issues. However, today in 2023, with more and more people having enclosed, fast printers, PETG is really starting to show its limits. So much so that some companies like Bamboo Lab aren't even offering it to their customers except in its carbon fiber reinforced variants. So what then? Should you just avoid PETG altogether for your projects? Well, not quite. You see, as I mentioned before, PETG is superior to PLA in terms of UV resistance, and when compared to something like ASA, it's often significantly cheaper, though it is still more expensive than PLA or ABS in many cases. Plus, PETG offers a great mix of strength and flexibility nonetheless, even if it isn't the best in class. And unlike many of these other materials, it does offer more flexibility and give than pretty much any other material, besides, of course, TPU. It also comes in lots and lots of colors and is really better for these translucent type colors that don't cloud up during printing. I mean, just look at this insane, gorgeous translucent by Filamentum. This would definitely cloud up if you printed it in a PLA. Finally, it really is much more warp resistant to print PETG than even ASA, which is touted for its warp resistance. So if you don't yet have an enclosed printer, PETG is going to be one of your absolute best options for functional parts that need to withstand either moderate heat, UV, or sustained strain. These days, personally, I only think of PETG when I need a material to have a little bit of give. But in the past, I used PETG for things like vertical planters, rep rack brackets, fan ducts, replacement light diffusers, and even this softbox for my video light, which needs to flex a little bit to clip on. However, if you do have an enclosed printer, in my opinion, you're better off looking into one of the next two materials. But first, I have to take a quick moment to thank this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Whether you're looking to build a portfolio website, a blog, an e-commerce shop, or anything in between, Squarespace makes it incredibly easy with their Fluid engine and their library of flexible website templates. I've been using Squarespace products for years, and I love their awesome customer service and how they just make everything so simple. Squarespace takes all of the guesswork out of building a website because they handle all the scary stuff like DNS, software updates, security, and performance so that you can focus on building your website or business. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/thenextlayer to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And here we go. We've gotten to the part of the video that I've been dreading. The part where I try to pronounce the proper name for ABS. Acrylonitrile butadiene styrene. You may not realize it, but ABS is probably the most commonly used plastic in your day-to-day life, used in everything from Lego blocks to automotive parts and much, much more. This is because ABS offers a whole host of benefits as compared to other plastics, especially in traditional manufacturing. It's got a great balance of impact resistance, toughness, and rigidity, particularly if you use some of the newer ABS Plus variants that are available out there. ABS also offers phenomenal stability under load, making it the plastic of choice for any functional parts that will be under sustained stress, particularly in warm conditions. This, for example, is why ABS, even just this basic stuff like the no-frills kind from Polymaker, is the recommended material for the printed components of Voron 3D printers and their very, very warm enclosed chambers. ABS is also great because it allows for vapor smoothing in case you need to make layer lines disappear. Finally, ABS is notoriously quick at melting and flowing, which is one of the main reasons that it is the standard in injection molding. So if you're looking to print things fast or do some speed benchies, then ABS is a great contender. With that said, there are some serious downsides to ABS, as with all materials. First of all, it warps a lot. In fact, most people would agree that your standard ABS cannot be printed without an enclosed printer, and even still, ABS is really best printed in a very warm enclosure, even if an actively heated chamber isn't necessary. As if warping weren't enough of a reason to only print ABS enclosed, there are also the fumes. Printing ABS stinks, and it can emit harmful VOCs that you do not want to be breathing. So not only should you print it enclosed, but you'll also want some type of carbon filter in the enclosure as well. Now, when I first started using ABS on my Prusa Mark IIIs Plus in a custom-made enclosure, video about that here, I had nothing but difficulty, and I swore that I would never buy another roll of ABS again. However, over time, as I migrated to more and more enclosed printers with smaller enclosures that could actually heat up the build volume properly, I've discovered that ABS is actually easier on some of my printers than even PLA or PETG, unless I remove the panels from my printers to allow those materials to cool better. As I mentioned before, I like to use ABS for anything that will be under sustained load, anything that I need vapor smooth, or anything that needs to sustain high heat without necessarily being exposed to UV radiation. Examples include these brackets for mounting a camera in my enclosure, filament spool roll holders, various brackets for electronics that will be exposed to heat, and more. Yes, ABS is sort of a non-starter for open printers, but fear not, because we still have yet to cover acrylonitrile styrene acrylate. Acrylonitrile styrene acrylate, or ASA, is in many ways very similar to ABS. In fact, I like to think of it as the new and improved ASA. While it is generally much more expensive than ABS, at least for now, it offers improvements in virtually every one of its predecessor's shortcomings. First of all, it can be printed without an enclosure as long as there are no drafts. Second, it has much higher UV resistance. Third, it is even more resistant to environmental stress, cracking, long-term heat, and even chemical wear. It can also be vapor smooth using the right chemicals. And then there's the smell. High-quality ASA has significantly fewer fumes, and while I haven't done any significant testing on VOCs emitted, I can definitely share that anecdotally, I get far fewer headaches when printing it out in the open. It even has lower shrinkage, making it easier to get perfect dimensions. Unfortunately, it's not all sunshine and rainbows with ASA. First, as I mentioned, there's the price. It often costs 50 to 100% as much as the cheapest of ABSs. Then there's availability. Whereas ABS is available from dozens of manufacturers in practically every color imaginable, ASA is much less available from fewer manufacturers. Finally, there's bed adhesion. Now, personally, I have always had an awful time getting most brands of ASA to actually stick to any print surface, ranging from glass to PEI, and inevitably I end up using mountains of hairspray and glue stick and much more just to get my prints to stick. So what then should you use ASA for? Well, obviously anything that you plan to put outdoors is a fantastic application for ASA. Additionally, any of the uses that I mentioned above for ABS are going to be even stronger, more heat resistant, and more durable if printed in ASA. Plus, if you're using an open design printer, then you should definitely just skip right over ABS altogether. Personally, because I have a number of enclosed printers now, these days I'm actually choosing to just save a little bit of money and buy ABS more often than I buy ASA, unless I need the UV resistance, such as something I'm specifically printing for outdoors. ASA is just too much of a pain to get to stick, plus I generally don't need the added mechanical durability that it offers. Or if I do, there are other materials or copolymers out there that I can choose from. Unfortunately, we don't have time in this video to cover all those different materials. Materials like nylon, polycarbonate, or carbon fiber blends. But if you'd like to see me do a video explaining when you should use those materials, well, then please drop me a comment below and let me know. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters for helping me pay the increasingly high bills. And thanks to all of you for watching, liking, and subscribing. We're giving away 50 rolls of filament thanks to Polymaker to celebrate hitting the 50,000 subscriber mark, and all you have to do to be eligible is to be publicly subscribed to the channel when we cross that mark. That's all for now, but I'll see all of you on the next layer.